Hi everyone. Welcome once again to the lectures of the Self-Knowledge course. Today we are going to talk about some very important symbols that we curiously find very present in all ancient Mesoamerican religions, which are the symbol of man being devoured by the serpent that swallows its tail, the symbol of the eagle swallowing the serpent, and also the feathered serpent. We are going to discover how this symbolism is fully related to the continuation of the work that we saw when we spoke of the intimate Christ and the death of the causal selves. Since all this process in which the eagle swallows the serpent tells us about the three last works that the Christ must do on the third mountain to achieve self-realization. To enter into context on this topic, let's start talking about the serpent. What does the serpent symbolize, and why a serpent? The serpent is a symbol that has been present in practically all cultures and all ancient religions. We see, for example, the Hindu gods represented with their serpents raised. We even see the representations of the Buddha in meditation with that seven-headed cobra serpent that rises behind him and covers him, representing that to achieve the state of enlightenment, it is necessary to lift those seven internal serpents. In Egyptian paintings, sculptures and representations, we see that they represent the gods, and on their heads, or from their hats, the serpent appears on their foreheads. We can even see the caduceus of Mercury, symbol of medicine, and we see in it the rod that represents the spine, and the two serpents, which are the energy conduits Ida and Pingala that ascend. In that symbol of Greek origin, we see the allusion to the serpent as a symbol of regeneration and health. What this serpent symbolizes is the transmuted sexual energy, or sacred fire of Kundalini. If we clairvoyantly observe the sacred fire ascending up our spinal column to the eyebrows in the practice of suprasex, we would see the similarity with the cobra snake. This ascending sacred fire emits a hissing sound very similar to the hissing of a snake. It is for this reason that sexual energy has always been symbolized by a serpent. The serpent has always had two connotations, one negative and one positive. In Christianity, for example, we see both serpents. On the one hand we see the tempting serpent of Eden that led man to his fall, and therefore, to the loss of his paradisiacal state. And on the other hand, we see the brass or fiery serpent, which raised Moses on the pole, and that healed the Israelites in the wilderness. And it is that, what the serpent represents, is our sexual energy. In its positive aspect, it is that Kundalini serpent, usually represented by a royal cobra, which represents the sexual energy ascending victoriously through our spine, regenerating us, giving us the elixir of long life, and creating the existential bodies of the being. In its negative aspect, it is that inverted serpent, represented in the Kunda buffer organ, which is that tail that we see coming out of the coccyx in the demons or devils that we see in paintings and sculptures. But it turns out that we all actually have that tail in etheric and astral form, since we fell into fornication. And as we have continued fornicating, that is, expelling our sexual energy, that tail has been developing. That inverted serpent, that inverted fire, is also represented as the python snake. The tempting serpent of Eden was then that sexual desire, which led us to fornicate and fall. It is the same sexual energy that either develops positively upwards or negatively downwards, depending on whether we overcome temptation or give in to it. The Kundalini serpent ascend within the spine of every white tantric. Kundalini means end of the Kunda buffer organ. Since as we develop the Kundalini serpent, we in turn shorten the Kunda buffer, until we completely eliminate that satanic tail of our nature. The serpent is, therefore, our divine mother Kundalini. When we achieve chastity by working on the self of fornication, balancing our energy centers, and transforming our Mercury from black to red, then the sacred fire lights up within us, and we receive the silver sword internally. That is when the Kundalini serpent awakens within us. But it is important to know that awakening the Kundalini is not everything. We not only need to awaken the serpent, we need to be swallowed by the serpent. When the serpent swallows us, she gives us all her powers. But the mother doesn't swallow anything impure. Therefore, there is a whole purification process that we must go through, in order to be swallowed by the serpent, and become serpent men. The first thing we must do is create the existential bodies on the first mountain, because the mother needs to devour the existential bodies in order to merge all of them into a single force, which is the force of love. But it turns out that the existential bodies of the first mountain are not pure enough. There is still a lot of ego in us at that point. At the end of the first mountain, we have approximately 78% of consciousness, and the causal selves are still alive in us. Therefore, it is necessary that the corruptible be dressed in incorruption. It is necessary to carry out all the work of the second mountain, that we explained in the lecture The Intimate Christ and the Death of the Causal Selves. Work in which the solar bodies will be transformed into bodies of gold, and where even the last trace of the ego in us will be eliminated. In that mountain, that is the mountain of death, the apocalypse, or the end by fire of all our inferior nature, of the entire ego, even of the very causes or seeds of the ego, is done. The second mountain is finished with 99% of consciousness. In the third mountain, the remaining 1% must be achieved. There, the mechanicalness of the wheel must end. That mechanicalness is in the three laws that have to be merged in the third mountain: the law of the Father, that of the Son, and that of the Holy Spirit. It is necessary to merge them into a single law because the Absolute cannot be entered as a trinity, or as a duality, but as a unity. The fusion of the 100% of consciousness is achieved when all the parts of the being are integrated. The Divine Mother Kundalini needs to devour the existential bodies of the being. But for her to be able to do that, all the bodies must have been transformed into pure gold, because she doesn't swallow anything impure. One could never be devoured by the serpent if one has not previously dissolved the animal ego. Whoever dissolves the ego is swallowed by the serpent. He who is swallowed by the serpent becomes a serpent. That is why the initiate has to disintegrate the causal selves. Without the disintegration of the causal selves, he could never step on the doors of the Absolute. Because he may have incarnated the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit within himself. But the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit before the Absolute are mechanical. He cannot penetrate because the ray of creation is divided into three laws, which don't allow him to enter the Absolute. That is why it is said that God himself has to die, because the initiate, having incarnated the three superior forces of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, is a God, capable of creating by means of the Word. But since before the Absolute he is mechanical, he has to go through a great mystical death, so that these laws merge into a single law. It is also necessary in the work of the third mountain to find a disciple who takes the direct path and reaches the second mountain. Because to liberate ourselves, we must help at least one person to self-realize. The third mountain is the mountain of sacrifice for humanity. And it is in the third mountain where the process will take place, so that the eagle swallows the serpent. There the three aspects of love will merge. The three aspects of fire that are the Christ, the Holy Spirit, and Lucifer. And the love will be merged to wisdom, that is, to the Father. The Holy Spirit is the same Divine Mother. It is that creative force that at this point is ready to swallow the existential bodies. The symbol of the eagle swallowing the serpent represents the three labors of the Christ on the third mountain. So there are three steps that the Christ must take on the third mountain to complete the work, achieving self-realization. Let's see the first step. At the end of the second mountain, after the death of the causal selves, the serpent of fire, which is the Christ, must unite with the Holy Spirit, thus becoming an Elohim, male-female. This is the beginning of the third mountain. In this step we are converted into serpent men. The serpent has swallowed us, we are turned into androgynous beings. From now on, we no longer continue with the physical partner. Marriage with the physical partner lasts until death do them part. So once the entire ego has died, work is done with the physical partner. The person remains integrated with his divine soul. And it is with his divine soul that will do the work of creating the bodies of light of the third mountain. In the second step, the serpent must start to absorb herself to form the O of the Spirit, the O of God the Mother, which is the serpent swallowing its tail, the Ouroboros. For this, the Christ defeats the dragon, Lucifer, in all temptations and merges with him. Since the Christ has already eliminated the causal selves, Lucifer no longer has anyone to tempt. There the forces of the Holy Spirit Christ and Lucifer are already fused. God the Mother is fully integrated. In the third and last step, the serpent, Christ Lucifer, is devoured by the eagle, which is the Father, and thus becomes the feathered serpent. Fair is his freedom after his hard work as a psychological trainer. He has been left without any shadow of evil. Then, the Logos, the Father, swallows him, absorbs him. Wisdom is integrated into love. He managed to crystallize in himself the three primary forces of the universe. On the third mountain these three forces die, and that is why it is said that God himself must die, because this is a God, capable of creating through the Word, and yet he must go through death. Death is a transformation, the unification of these three forces into one. That is the symbol of the Aztecs, when the eagle swallows the serpent, the passage from duality to unity. Because the Absolute must be entered as unity, not as Trinity nor as duality, but as unity. The two laws are absorbed into one, and one remains united to the Great Law, connected to the Absolute directly by the Great Law to reach unity, total liberation. The eagle represents the spirit and the serpent the fire. When the eagle swallows the serpent, then we become feathered serpents, a Quetzalcoatl, and the work is accomplished. As you can see in this beautiful lecture, the Masters have clearly shown us the culmination process of this wonderful work of self-knowledge that we came to do in this physical manifestation. And we can also see here, how in all cultures, and in all times, the knowledge of this path has existed, and has been encrypted in its art as a legacy that has passed through time. And well, this has been the 23rd lecture of Phase B. In the next topic we will explain another very interesting symbol, the cross. In that lecture we will talk about the practice of the cross, and what the cross symbolizes. Remember that you can leave us any questions you may have. Thank you for participating. Until next time.